In this video, we want to talk about the multi-resolution sculpting workflow, how we're going to go from point A to point B as cleanly and as efficiently as we can. We want to be able to infuse a lot of extra geometry inside of our sculpture so that we can continue to refine the quality of the work and also to add new details. Luckily for us, the multi-resolution modifier is going to be our big helper in this entire system. So I've just loaded in my little turtle model here, and if we take a look at the object inside of sculpt mode, and I'm going to turn on my geometric wireframes. Here we go. Now we can see exactly how many polygons are on the scene. It's about 22,000 polygons for my little sculpture, and I'm pretty pleased with that. That's a good place to begin. I like that very much. At this resolution, we have enough geometry to make some final changes, to make some final edits. Now, I'm going to show you something here that's really neat, because the multi-resolution modifier is going to do us a really good favor. It's going to help us continue to add new details, but we can also edit all of those details throughout all the different resolutions, subdivision revolution stages inside of our mesh. Let's check it out real fast. Let's add the modifier once again. Same one, multi-resolution. Okay, and let's subdivide our mesh just one time. Boop, and now we have a lot of geometry. We're at about 89,000 faces, which is pretty cool. Now, one of the great things about working with the multi-resolution modifier is that we can naturally add and subtract new subdivisions. If we were to go up to an additional subdivision, my computer's going to think about it for a minute, now we have 358,000 polygons, which is now approaching the resolution that we can infuse a lot of really great details. This is a pretty cool system. Let me show you a great little trick here. I'm going to go in with my draw brush, and I think what I want to do, let's turn off the wireframes. I think what I want to do is begin to accentuate this little eye here, this little shelf. If you look real carefully in the reference images, most turtles have a pretty pronounced eye. This is kind of like a lid, if you will. Let's make the brush a little bit bigger. Oops, I want to grab the top part, something like that. Yeah, I'm going to go into this brush here. This is the Draw Sharp brush, and I like this one because it allows me to cut some forms in. I can either cut a line in there, which is pretty neat, or another great alternative. I want to make a nice, a little bit more of a consistent transition between the top of the head and this beginning of the eyelid itself. You can also use the pinch tool. The pinch brush is a great one because it's just going to start to pull some shapes together. This is why having good sculptable geometry is so important for us, because we can go in and start to really massage the geometry. Yeah, there we go. Now we're starting to see it. And have it follow the loops that we've created. Yeah, it's subtle, and it's supposed to be subtle. We don't necessarily need all of the plane changes to be real sharp, chiseled edges. With organic objects, we want to have a nice smooth transition between some of these forms, and I'm starting to like that. I'm going to do a little bit of pinching down here as well to start bringing this side of the eyelid and the inside of the eyelid together just a little bit more, maybe on the rim as well. As I'm sculpting and going through this, I'm often asking myself, how is this plane going to terminate? If you look very carefully here, we have a wonderful plane on the top that establishes the eyelid. We have the rim of that plane, and then we have another shape underneath it that kind of is the bottom of the eyelid itself. And how are all of these planes going to intersect and then terminate? Is it going to terminate very abruptly and sharply at an edge, or are we just going to have it feather out and smoothly transition into the forms surrounding those planes? I think I'm just going to have it smoothly transition, just using the grab brush here to tighten it up. As much as I love the pinch tool, at times it can be a little bit easier and faster just to grab some polygons and move them around, and I'm pretty pleased with that. That's a good place to go. I'm happy with the result that we're getting here. I'm going to go back into the classic draw brush, reduce the size of my brush just a little bit, start to accentuate this a little bit. I'm going to bring down the back of the eye and then smooth it out a little bit. We have enough geometry in here to do a lot of really fantastic work, and my brush is too small, and I'm producing some undesirable dimples in the mesh itself. This is an artifact of not having, now the brush is too big and the intensity is too big, and you can see what's going on. Yeah, I'm just going to smooth it out, being mindful of the directions that I'm smoothing my mesh. I want it to smooth this way. I'm going from the left to the right. I want to smooth backwards in the shape itself. Okay, I'm happy with that. That's starting to look pretty good. I want to have a nice pronounced sense of a jawline in here. So again, I'm going to start with the pinch and just kind of bring those polygons together. We don't need to be super illustrative, and going into wireframe at times does a really great job of highlighting what the pinching tool is going to do. Hopefully you can see the wireframes start to come together now. I went a little too extreme on that, but as an illustration of what the tool is doing, we now have a very sharp edge between those two objects, and that can be kind of fun. I may have gone a little bit too far, so I'm going to undo it and then just do a little bit. I'm lightly brushing just to bring out a small little indication that there's a jawline in there, and I'm happy with that. If we look at the corners of the mouth here, we have a small little issue that I think I need to resolve, and this is really coming from the density of the subdivision of the multi-resolution modifier. I now have a bunch of polygons in this small area, and I intentionally created a loop so that I can control the flow of polygons coming down from the top of its nose and have it wrap back up. I wanted this to be part of the model itself, but it's getting a little too packed down here. But luckily for us, I can just smooth it out a little bit and create a nice termination spot in the mesh itself, smoothing towards the back of the model now, being mindful as to where I'm sending all of this stuff. Okay, real quickly, I'm going to tighten up this transition between the beak and its nose itself. This beak requires a little bit of massaging. I like to, my brush is too big. I'm going to turn on my smooth stroke, my stabilized stroke as well. That way I can just go in and slowly find that connection point between those two planes. And I'm liking that. Yes, that's working for me. Now we have a very defined plane for the nose. It transitions into the beak, and it's looking pretty good. It's pretty uniform, though. The snake hook tool is a really great one to use. Just give it a little bit of life. The brush is too small, so make it a little bit bigger. Yeah, the snake hook tool is great because it just gives us a little bit of inorganic movement in there. And believe it or not, those small little changes in the mesh are paying off. They are simple things that your brain is going to see and realize. So don't be afraid to put them in there. These are organic shapes. We want them to be a little bit messy at times. We're allowed to be a little bit messy. And I'm liking that. Do the same thing for the bottom, but I want you to see some extra benefits of working inside of this multi-resolution sculpting workflow. So I'm working on sculpt layer 2 here, which has got about 350,000 polygons, and I'm liking that. However, if I go back down to a lower sculpt level, here we go, here's 1, and then there's 2, you can see that the form on level 0, the raw mesh, is very different than what we have on layer 1. I pulled out all of this information on layer 1 and layer 2. If I was to send this over to Substance Painter right now, that extreme eye bend in here, because I was pulling that out, pinching it, is not represented in that shape there. Let's look at it from the front view. Now I'm going to walk up my subdivision layers here. So here's the original. Here's subdivision layer 1. And you can see that that eyelid has been brought out. Well, I want to make sure that this information has been preserved and saved into my base layer, into level 0. Because level 0 is the model that we're going to send over into Substance Painter. So I need to have all of that information in there as well. And this is where the power of the multi-resolution sculpting modifier really comes in, and it's pretty neat. If we go into the shape area, we want to go and we want to choose apply base. And I accidentally went to level 0. Let's go to level 2. There we go. Because I want to make sure that all of this sculpting information that I changed to the mesh has then been applied to the same verts on level 1, or level 0, excuse me. And that's where apply base comes in. If we turn it on, it's going to take a couple seconds to think about it. Okay, now with it's done, nothing changes here on level 2. But remember, watch that eye shape as I walk down to level 1. Here's level 1. And then level 0, the eye shape was changed. It took all of the vertex locations that we changed in level 2 and applied it to the exact same verts in level 0, which is really, really cool. So the big picture idea here is that I could go in as I sculpt on the highest resolution. I can go, I'm going to really destroy the mesh just to make a point. If I go in and do this at level 2, perhaps I want to preserve that form in level 0. So I'll apply the base. It's going to think about it for a second or two. And then once we go back to level 0, you can see that all of those verts have been moved to match the position of their higher resolution counterparts. Now, clearly that's not what I want, but it really kind of speaks to the power of the multi-resolution workflow. It allows us to preserve all of the high-resolution sculpting that we performed in our original base mesh itself, which is incredibly neat. Now, if we're making big changes to the mesh, we may need to UV map this, and huge changes like this, we'll have to re-UV. Changes like I have performed here at the front, where I'm just slightly changing the form. It's not too radically different than what we had. We probably don't need to UV, but I'll definitely need to make sure I check it before I go any further. But this apply base tool is just a really great addition to our sculpting workflow when using the multi-resolution modifier. It's awesome because it allows us to preserve all of the work that we do at our higher levels into the lower levels. And I find myself just loving it so much because now I can work and continue to sculpt and maybe punch some of this stuff out and accentuate some of these details and then apply it to my base and know that just the smallest inclination of those changes are going to show up on my original levels, because that original level, level 0, is what we're going to send over in a substance painter. And level 0 and level 2, in my case, need to be pretty similar in volume. The details are going to be different, which is fine. That's by design. But the volume of the polygons and where they're positioned within inside the scene need to be the same. So this is the power of the multi-resolution workflow, because now we can go in and go to a higher level, sculpt away, add as much detail as we want, hit apply to base, and have a lower resolution version of that high resolution information showing up on the model that's eventually going to be sent over into Substance Painter.